Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Question and Answer. I am your host, Panyo Basa, and as it usually happens, I wait until I've got a fair amount of questions to answer, and then I think, oh, it's time to do a Q&A soon. So I put up the announcement that I'm going to be doing a Q&A soon, and anyone having a question should ask it, and then I get a whole bunch more. So we got like whole lots of questions to answer. And so, without any further ado, telling you about the strange morning I had. Um, oh, what the hell, I'll tell you. I got up, I'm sitting there on the couch for about 10 minutes looking at emails and so forth, and these two little next door neighbor kids come over and invite me over to their house. And I'm over there and they're like exercising their insistence upon me, like getting me stuff to eat and showing me their rocks and their little dinosaur collection and this kind of thing. And I was appointed king of the back port, so I appointed their dog prime minister and came back home. So I guess the dog is now in charge over there. Anyway, I'm going to exercise the awakeness I have on this very relaxed Saturday and answer all these questions. And so the first question is from Hey It's Tig. And Hey It's Tig says, what is the purpose of the fan that I see certain Sayados pictured with? And yeah, I do think it's mainly a Burmese phenomenon where you'll see a picture of some famous monk and they've got their robes done up in a certain way a lot of the time, like with the big collar around their neck, and they're holding a big fan, often with like the name of their monastery or something on around the edge of it. And it's one of the relatively few possessions that monks commonly own or traditionally. And obviously, the main reason for a fan is if it's hot, and it often is in Burma, you fan yourself to thermoregulate. But the main reason, up until relatively recently, I think, one of the main reasons was um, I have read that 100 years ago or more, like even back in the 1800s, when a Sayadaw or senior monk would give a Dhamma talk, he would give the Dhamma talk behind the fan. He'd be like hiding his face with the fan. And the purpose of that was to avoid distractions from seeing pretty girls or something in the audience. Although now it has pretty much just degenerated into a kind of accessory. Um, I mean, it's not really used very much. It's just something traditionally that Burmese monks, especially Burmese Dhamma teaching monks, have. It's just part of the uniform. And there's a lot of that in Burma where, um, I mean, there's a lot of that everywhere, really, where people do things that don't necessarily make much sense just because that's what you're supposed to do. And so holding a fan while posing for a picture or giving a Dhamma talk is just part of Burmese tradition, I think. And even I did it sometimes, although mostly I would carry a fan around for thermoregulation purposes. So the next question is from Seeker Celt or Seeker Celt. I'm not sure on the pronunciation. And Seeker Celt or Celt says, what's your thoughts on rays of light emanating from the awakened one? Is it in suta? Well, there's like Theravada Buddhist tradition. I don't know about Mahayana, where there's like a multicolored nimbus of light radiating from the head of the Buddha. And those colors are what are represented on the Buddhist sasana flag. And I'm not going to try and name all the colors because really I'm not much interested in the mythological stuff. And I would guess that multicolored lights emanating from the Buddha's head would be more mythology than history, because a lot of people would see the Buddha and they just think he was an ordinary monk or just some ordinary person. So I mean, if he really was 27 feet tall with multicolored rays of light emanating from his head, yeah, I think people would be impressed by that and be not quite willing to diss him very much. So, Seeker Celt Celt is asking, is it in Sutta? And I'm not 100% sure. As I say, I've never really been much interested in that, and so it doesn't really soak in even if I read it. But there is a strange sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, which is full of all sorts of miraculous stuff about the Buddha, even like when he was born. His mother was standing up holding onto a tree. He was born without any goop on him at all. And immediately he just takes off walking like 7 steps towards the east, I think, with like a lotus blossom sprouting under his foot at each step. And he's saying, I am the greatest. There's no further rebirths for me, and so forth. And I think that sutta may have the multicolored rays of light, and it may be elsewhere in the Dipitaka. It wouldn't surprise me, but I can't say for sure because I do not recall um, clearly if it really is in the Pali Suttas, but I get a feeling that there's a good chance that it is. And I'm too lazy or uninterested to try and research this and look it up. But there's a sutta, and I don't even remember the name of it. It's just, oh, yeah, I don't even remember the name. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, though. So there's only 152 suttas there, so you can find it, I'm sure. Next question is from Caveman. And Caveman says, can you elaborate more on your personal experience with celibacy and semen retention and how it affected you? I'm curious how long you went without sexual release and how difficult it was. Well, this is a topic that a lot of people are really interested in. I knew this, or I had this reader, this cyber follower who actually started a blog or a website just on this particular subject, and some people take it very seriously. With regard to semen retention and celibacy, how it affected you. Um, let's see. I guess those are like two different things, so I can start with celibacy. How it affected me was it made me frustrated a lot of the time. Um, Sort of like a man who is fasting, and I've experienced this also. You fast for 5 days, and you spend a lot of time just imagining what you want to eat when you start eating again. And I think celibacy has that effect on a lot of people, where um, it's just the celibacy is only partially successful because even though physically you're not doing it, there's still the desire there, and it keeps percolating up into the consciousness and turns into like pornographic thoughts and so forth. So, I mean, I was technically celibate for 30 years, and I managed not to get excommunicated, although I was, I mean, I never really stopped liking girls and, being just essentially instinctively heterosexual. So that didn't go away, and I don't think it ever completely goes away, except in certain cases where maybe you have like just a massive shift in consciousness, shift in perception due to some crisis, or maybe you just never really liked girls or had much of a sex drive to begin with, something like that. I've noticed Burmese monks tend not to be um, particularly obsessed with sexuality. Like I stayed at this big school monastery once. It had during the rainy season there were 600 monks and 900 novices all staying there, plus like 100 scroungy dogs. And sometimes there'd be like this little flock of Burmese girls dressed in their best clothes, just walking along. And I'd be watching the monks. There'd be a group of monks in front of me. They'd walk by them, and not a single head would turn. They were just completely uninterested, which was probably not due to their holiness so much as just they just weren't interested, which is maybe one of the reasons why some of them became monks in the first place. I remember there was this one monk that I knew, and sometimes we'd travel together with a bunch of other monks. And in Burma, you're driving along, and by roadside wells, the village people would just go there to take a bath. And sometimes you'd see, young women taking a bath, and they'd have like a bathing sarong on from their armpits down to below their knees, but still they'd be wet and clingy and shiny and so forth. And it was this one other monk was the only one that I ever saw whose head would turn so he could watch as we went by. So that's kind of getting off the subject of how it affected me. But yeah, I never completely mastered celibacy, and I am no longer celibate now. With regard to semen retention, the way it worked with me was every 2 to 3 weeks, I would just have a pornographic dream, and so the semen would be released. The pressure would be released. It's like you don't explode. Um, if you really need that to happen, then it's going to happen somehow or other, like in your sleep or whatever. Sometimes you can just overflow. So, how long I went without sexual release? I assume that means an orgasm or emission of seminal fluid. Um, Up until like my early to mid 40s, it was like I just said, it was every few weeks, at least every few weeks, I would have a wet dream, nocturnal emission. And after that, as my blood cooled a bit, it was longer and longer. I no longer, I mean, after my early to mid 40s, I stopped having wet dreams, and I kind of missed it. It was like the only semblance of action I was getting anyway. Um, but it's difficult. Celibacy can be difficult for someone who is just instinctively like what's the word? Uh, I'm trying to think of a word and it's not coming. But if you're just naturally, it's just built into your character or something that you are um, heterosexual, you're attracted to attractive members of the opposite sex, then yeah, I mean, it's not going to be easy. But it does definitely have its advantages, I suppose. I mean, if you're living a spiritual life of a renunciant, um, yeah, I mean, living in a cave and meditating a lot and so forth, it doesn't work as easily if you have a mate who wants to be comfy. Being an ascetic doesn't work so well. So for 30 years, it seemed worth it, and yeah, I got benefits from it, obviously, at least obvious to me. So I guess that's enough on that question. I'm not sure how well I answered it. I suppose I should just go over the question one last time here. Can I elaborate more on my personal experience with silk? Yeah, I mean, there were times when I was just extremely frustrated, just wanted to cry or howl like a dog or something. Um, Curious how long went without sexual release. Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, not excommunicating myself was relatively easy, and for a monk, it's a very serious offense. Not excommunication, but one notch below excommunication, even to deliberately have an orgasm, to have an orgasm on purpose. And there were maybe 4 times in 30 years when I was, it's just, you're not exactly spanking the puppy, but you're petting it a little bit, and it just goes off, so to speak. And um, when that happens, I mean, you just have to just freeze and just let it happen. You can't do anything to help it along. And there were a few times, like 4 times, when there was just in doubt. You have to psychoanalyze yourself afterwards. It's like, did I do that on purpose? And did I do like the motions that helped it to happen, like when it already started. And so I would go through the penance and everything, like 4 times because of that. And yeah, it can really be a problem for certain monks. But enough of that. Let's just move on to the next question. Also from Caveman, if there is no self, how does karma persist from one life to the next? What is it that connects my current life with my past life? Yeah, this is a common question. In fact, some question along these lines is asked almost every episode of Q&A here. Um, how does karma persist from one life to the next? It's just the momentum of the karma itself. You can refer to it as something like a spiritual equivalent of the law of conservation of energy, something like that. It just you have this momentum, and when the body that this momentum is apparently inhabiting dies, it immediately has to appear in Theravada Buddhism. That stream of consciousness it just immediately has to appear the very next moment. So there is no limbo or anything in between lives. It's like the moment of death, as soon as your mental process ceases finally in one life, the very next moment there has to be a reappearance in a different existence. And it could be a brief one, something similar to the Bardo realms mentioned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or it could be, another human or whatever. But it's the karma is just this process. It's not really an abiding entity. It's changing, and sort of like a flame. And I mean, you can refer to a flame as one flame, but it's a completely different flame from one moment to the next, because it's just in this constant state of change and flux. So what is it that connects your current life with your past life? Would be the similarity of this, of the direction and just overall momentum of the volitional processes of the mind. So I'll just move on to the next question from Yuichiro. Should we hate evil? And the answer is no. I mean, you should avoid evil if you can, but hate is itself, from the Buddhist point of view, hate is itself, if not evil, at least it's unskillful, unwholesome. It creates bad karma, regardless of what it is you're hating. And I've noticed a lot of Christians, um, including like ancient Christians, they would, in the New Testament, Christianity it teaches you should love your enemies, but then they would still, the hate kind of runs deep in some people. So they would not hate their enemies, but they would still hate enemies of the church or enemies of God, which could be most of the human race. But and then there's like Mahatma Gandhi's idea of, you don't hate the sinner, you just hate the sin, but the sin and the sinner cannot be separated. You take away um, one, and the other one really isn't there either. Um, just hating the sin without hating the sinner. I mean, it's like trying to hate a person's behavior while not hating the person. I mean, their behavior is part of them, so you're hating part of that person anyway. So no, you shouldn't hate evil. I mean, you should avoid it. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't wallow in it. But if you encounter it, then you should try to maintain equanimity, and probably best not even to really stick the label of evil onto it. Just see it as an unskillful form of energy that sort of like fire or something. You should be careful with it, not let it burn you. But other than that, I mean, hate is hate, regardless of what you're hating. It may be less bad for you to hate evil than to hate good, or to hate black licorice or whatever, but still, hate is hate, and you should avoid it. It's like greed, hate, and delusion are the three poisons, or the three fires that keep us in samsara. So even hating evil is hating. So I'll just move on to the next question here from Marshall. And Marshall says, is there much of a vegetarian tradition in Theravada Buddhism, either amongst lay followers or the Sangha? So I really can't speak for other Theravada Buddhist countries, but I can speak for Burma. And in Burma, some monks and some lay people are That Lut, which is their equivalent of vegetarian. That Lut means not killing breathing life, you know, and that's really the vegetarian tradition in Theravada is just based on ahimsa or non-harming, that people will avoid eating meat, just sort of like a lot of people in the West would be vegetarian. They just don't want to kill animals. Or Mahatma Gandhi, who said he didn't want an animal to have its throat cut just so he could have a good taste in his mouth. So, yeah, there is some of that. It's not real common, but some monks in Burma and some lay people in Burma are that Lut. With regard to Sri Lanka, I assume it would be more common because there's more of a Hindu element in the culture there. That Theravada Buddhism is more strongly Indian culturally in Sri Lanka than in Burma or Thailand, and vegetarianism is a big deal in India. So, yeah, I'll just say yeah. So we move on to the next question, which is from Motorhead. And Motorhead says, if we are all living in a dream of a dream of a dream and nothing is real and the spiritual realms are beyond comprehension, question mark, question mark, question mark. Oh, what if we are all living in a dream of a dream of a dream? Well, I would just say that spiritual realms are beyond comprehension regardless, whether we're living in a dream of a dream of a dream or not. Like the ultimate truth is just beyond comprehension. I mean, you can't understand it like mentally. It's not something you can wrap your head around. And so if you go into a deep spiritual state where you're wide awake and not thinking anything, you're just experiencing this experience, this pure consciousness. If you really get advanced in your meditation, um, you sort of transcend it. It's irrelevant if you're in a dream of a dream of a dream anyway, because I mean, samsara or maya, it's all illusory. It's based on delusion. Greed, hate, and delusion are the three fires or poisons that keep us here. And so samsara really is based on delusion, and it's not ultimate truth. You know, any samsaric fact is really not ultimately true. And ultimate truth, again, you cannot understand it intellectually. It's not a matter of concepts. It's just, there are no moving parts, so to speak. So we're all living in a dream, at least, whether it's a dream of a dream of a dream. It's hard to say. I mean, when we're dreaming at night, it might be a dream of a dream. Um, so if nothing is real, well, that's, I mean, that would be like radical nihilism or nihilism. Um, Nothing is real. I mean, I don't know if that's even possible, that nothing is real, because even an illusion has to be based on something. I mean, the illusion can't just be pure illusion, like even like a mirage. You know, you see some guy in the desert sees the oasis off in the distance, and that's a mirage. It's not really there, but the mirage is caused by something. It's caused by convection currents and distortion of like light rays through the heat and so forth. And the dream is um, based on an underlying reality. And really, like mysticism, going into a profound mystical state, you're penetrating through the ultimate or to the underlying reality. So that's like the purpose of it. So I'll just move on to the next question. We've got lots of questions. So the next question is from Exemporium. And Exemporium says, at first I mistook Mahasi in your title. He was commenting on blog post I wrote about the Mahasi tradition. At first, I mistook Mahasi in your title for Mahasati, which was a method designed by a Thai Theravada monk, Langpor. What is this? Tian, looks like. Have you heard of this? Similar to noting, but there are required movements. This particular monk and the tradition or method that he founded, I've never heard of before. I mean, Mahasati just means great mindfulness, great recollection. So yeah, I understand the term. I may have seen the term before, but this monk and his method I have never heard of before. So that was an easy question. It was just nope. And I'll move on to the next question, which is also from Exemporium. And he says, these questions came to me in a dream, and you might be able to help given your biological and Buddhist backgrounds. First, do all the cells in our body die to be replaced during our lifespan so that we may be said to live multiple lives during this time? Second, I vaguely remember hearing that brain cells are not replaced. So are we looking at one brain mind living in multiple bodies while assuming the same I identity? Well, with regard to cells and dying cells and cells being replaced, I'm not an expert. I assume that the cells in our body would be like protozoans, where they reproduce by dividing, and maybe it's like um, they have some way that's evolved into them of, there's like the old broken down cell that dies, and the other half is healthier, or some I guess your spleen or bone marrow can create cells. So yeah, I mean obviously your blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells die and are replaced by new ones. um, Brain cells, yeah, they tend not to regenerate very well. um, but there, even that, I mean, there is neuroplasticity and so forth. So I guess I'm just doing a roundabout, long-winded way of saying that I really am not an authority on um, the life cycles of the cells in the human body. Um, but I mean, in a way, it's from a Buddhist point of view, it's largely irrelevant, because from the Buddhist point of view, you're a different person from one moment to the next, even assuming that person is a valid designation. Um, a one brain mind living in multiple bodies while assuming the same I identity. Um, I would say no, because your brain mind is different from one moment to the next, just like a flame is different from one moment to the next. It's just the similarity um, of the past brain mind with the present brain mind causes them to be conflated into the same thing when really they are not. They're just similar enough that we call them by the same name. So in a way, I've just sidestepped the main gist of this question, and just answered it from a different angle. But yeah, so I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is also from Ex Emporium, by the way. Might the cells themselves be considered sentient beings at some level? Sometimes I scare myself. Well, the cells of our bodies, um, you know, we're in a way we are a very complicated colony of protozoans. We're single-celled animals that evolved to form a colony with specialization of function. I mean, from the evolutionary point of view, that is how multicellular life evolved. We started off as colonies of single-celled organisms. And a single-celled organism I would consider to have a very, very simple form of consciousness. I think it may be that everything in the universe, every phenomenal entity in the universe has some kind of consciousness. Even like a hydrogen atom would just have like this elemental, absolutely primitive kind of consciousness to it. But it would have, I mean, obviously they wouldn't be thinking. I don't think an amoeba or, a muscle cell or a hydrogen atom actually has thoughts. They don't, I don't think they're nearly complicated enough to do that. So it's more like just this little spark of consciousness. And it takes something like a brain or something performing essentially the same function as a brain, like to act as like a computer, to take this consciousness and complicate it and organize it and utilize it. So I don't think the brain generates consciousness. It just uses consciousness the way a computer uses electricity. So the cells of our body, they are in a sense individual beings. They're like a white blood cell is essentially amoeboid. It's like they're like little amoebas. Um, but I think their sentience is of a very primordial and very elemental, primitive sort. So I'll just move on to the next question from Tyr. And Tyr says, I feel that spiritual truth or off the scale truth should and does encompass practical truth or red pill truth. How can someone know ultimate truth if they're not even able to recognize practical truth? Like in so-called Western Buddhism, sadhu. Well, I would say that practical truth is of an entirely different order from ultimate truth. I've already mentioned that ultimate truth is just inconceivable. I mean, you cannot contain it in concepts. It's not intellectual at all. It's just reality, just the experience of reality. And reality is, when I say reality, I'm not talking about the phenomenal world with books and bookcases and so forth. Um, I'm talking about just what in Buddhism would be called nirvana or nirvana dhatu, or in Hinduism is Brahman, Tao. Some theists would call it God. And so there are an infinite number of possible phenomenal like manifestations. Every like God itself is like the block of marble. I've talked about this lots of times. You got this block of marble, and contained within that block of marble are every possible statue. Every statue is already in that block of marble in potential form or virtual form. Every molecule is already in the right place, and the artist, the sculptor, just carves away the excess, but it was already there. Nothing was added. It's already there, and it's an infinite number, depending on how the sculptor decides to carve the rock. And I do consider the phenomenal universe to be that way. So I'm quite willing to accept like the multiverse hypothesis, the many worlds hypothesis. And so getting back to like practical truth, or what in Buddhism is called conventional truth, samuti sacha, it's really not true. I mean, it's true just because people accept it as true. People agree that it's true, so that makes it conventionally true. But ultimately, truth cannot be spoken. The name that can be named is not the eternal name, and so forth. So, how can someone know ultimate truth if they're not even able to recognize practical truth? Um, I do think that like an enlightened being who experiences just the no moving parts ultimate reality, still, I mean, they're not going to be able to understand Chinese necessarily unless they were born into a Chinese culture. They may not know the square root of 51. They won't know how many hairs are on the head of everyone who walks by. There's all kinds of truths that they won't know. Um, some people like the Jains especially would say that a fully enlightened Jain, like a Tirthankara, he is just omniscient. He just knows everything simultaneously. And in Buddhism, the Buddha also was considered to be like volitionally omniscient, which means if he wants to know something, he can know it, but he's not like knowing it all the time. He's not knowing everything all the time. But again, conventional truth isn't really ultimately true at all, and it's largely just conditional. You know, if these other things are true, then this is true. That's the way dependent co-arising works. It's all conditional. This universe we're living in is conditionally real. It's virtually real. It's like if we accept that this, that, and the other are true, then this other thing also is true. But it's um, it's more a matter of coherence than like being based on some underlying reality. Except just that anything can arise from this basic underlying reality, just like any statue can be carved from the rock. So it's sort of like more than 100 years ago, there was in epistemological circles there was somewhat of a debate on what is truth, and the main theory, which is still the main theory, which is pretty much taken over, is the correspondence theory of truth, which is that in order for a statement A to be true, it has to correspond to some reality. Whereas there were some Hegelians like F.H. Bradley who preferred the coherence theory of truth. And the coherence theory of truth is that statement A is considered to be true if it isn't not contradicting any other statements that have already been determined to be true. And I do think that's how conventional truth works. And then there was a third version, a third theory that died out relatively quickly, which was founded by William James and a few others, which was pragmatism. It's just true if it practically works. But that's not taken very seriously anymore. But I do think the coherence theory of truth really is true for samsaric conventional truth. So I think that enlightened beings like the Buddha, they can still endorse just traditional mythological um, beliefs like the flat earth floating on water, for example. That an enlightened being born into a culture, assuming that enlightened being really means anything at the conventional level, um, they tend to just follow along with their tradition. I'm not saying Jesus of Nazareth was necessarily enlightened, but he was born in Jewish culture, and so he followed a Jewish point of view with some modifications. The Buddha was born into largely Vedic culture, and so he adopted a largely Vedic point of view with some modifications, and and so on. So I do think that enlightened beings, even if they have experienced ultimate reality, they won't necessarily um, know conventional truths because they're just an infinite number of possible conventional truths that are largely arbitrary, just like the statues in the block of marble. Just because you know the block of marble doesn't mean that you know what statue the sculptor who's looking at it is envisioning in that block of marble. So I guess I'll just move on to the next question. That was a good question, though. I like that one. The next question is from Era Fascista. And Era Fascista says, thoughts on metal, black metal in specific. Well, people listen to music in order to evoke certain emotions. Music is like an emotional language. It's not really a verbal language except for the lyrics, of course. But it's like these patterned sounds that elicit emotional responses in the hearer. And some kinds of emotions I like more than others. Like rock and roll, I really like in general, just because it has this feeling of intensity and power that it's like it's invigorating. It's like a stimulant. Other kinds of music, like experimental electronic music, or like what is it? Techno, like trance music, stuff like that. It just takes you into a kind of disembodied, unusual, otherworldly kind of state, which I like. It's sort of a disorienting, almost like ego dissolving kind of music. But other kinds of music I've just never liked because it evokes emotions that I don't like very much, and like dark, what is this, dark metal, or black metal, death metal, thrash metal. It's got a lot of negativity in it that um, I mean, it can be good music, but most of it has so much sort of dark, like a dark negative kind of vibe that, and it just doesn't appeal to me because I prefer more uplifting or, um, I guess uplifting, more upbeat kind of music. With regard to black metal, about my favorite one that I've listened to is Mountains of God's Depression by Dominia. You can look it up on YouTube. And one reason why I like it is it starts off really mellow, like piano. There's a little violin in it, and then it just switches over into just the raging, guitars and the throat screechy stuff. And it's a nice balance. And I really like listening to mellow music written by like heavy metal bands, just because you can feel that it's like they got the brakes on all the time. There's like this repressed intensity that they're like holding back. You can just kind of feel that behind the scenes. So I like that. But the throat screechy stuff, especially, I just do not like. I do not consider it to be any kind of improvement on actual singing. Sort of like rap music, I've never liked. And I mean, it's not an improvement on singing. It's not really singing, and it doesn't sound better than singing. It's not more musical than singing. So I do consider that aspect of black metal, just the throat screechy stuff, to be sort of a kind of a degeneration of music, sort of like rap. And I may have just offended people who like black metal or rap, but we all have our own preferences. I think I'd much rather listen to Rock Lobster by the B-52s than just about any kind of black metal. Whereas my sweetheart is the exact opposite. It's just she just can't take it seriously. It's like being at the carnival with screaming kids all around her. It's just too hippity hoppity for her taste, and she likes the dark metal stuff. So it's just a matter of personal temperament, I guess. There is kind of an interesting video I saw a few years ago. It's by Dr. Steve Turley, and this guy. I mean, you wouldn't expect this from him. He's like a conservative Christian guy with conservative Christian commentary, like political commentary. And about 3 years ago, he did this one video called "The Post-Globalist Aesthetics of Extreme Heavy Metal Music." And he's just talking about how some of the dark metal stuff, it evokes like pre-modern imagery and pre-modern modes of thought that are in a way sort of a reaction against globalism, which is interesting. But yeah, if I like some heavy metal, and I like intense rock and roll, but this the really dark vibe, the negativity and the throat screechy stuff, I just don't like very much. And music that relies too much on lyrics, I it's I mean, I can still like it, but usually when I listen to music, I go into like right hemisphere mode. It's like nonverbal. So the lyrics are just like one of the instruments. Like the vocalist he's just might as well just be another instrument that adds to the music. I really like Led Zeppelin, but that's not black metal. Yeah, I have read that Led Zeppelin 2 was the first heavy metal album, but I'm not sure about that. So I guess that's enough about black metal. Yeah, some metal I like, heavy metal I like, but black metal not so much. Next question is from Diane. And Diane says, what are the precepts that are common to most religions? And that's kind of an interesting question because a lot of people will say, all religions are teaching essentially the same things. It's like do good, don't do evil, tell the truth, and so forth. Don't kick puppies. But if you look at the world's major religions, there is a lot of disagreement, even on basic morals. Like Islam and like biblical Judaism are about two of the main ones that say that it's okay to kill people if you've got a good reason, if they're going against God or something. Some religions say you shouldn't drink alcohol, like Buddhism and Islam. But Jesus drank wine, so the Christians aren't much inclined to outlaw that. I guess some sects of Protestantism, um, like I think the Mormons maybe, are opposed to drinking alcohol. But so you can always find exceptions, but the main ones, um, not killing. I mean, even Christianity sees nothing wrong with killing animals, but at least murder tends to be like on the list of ethical. Especially if they're, they haven't done anything wrong. Somebody's minding their own business. I mean, that would be basic ethics. You don't go kill them. Um, no stealing. I think pretty much all religions would say you shouldn't steal. I think almost all religions would say you shouldn't lie, although um, in the Old Testament there seems to be some lying involved by some of the sages of early Hebrew times. Hmm. So yeah, like the basic precepts of Buddhism, like the first four especially, would be pretty close to like a universal ethic. Um, no killing of other people anyway, um, unless it's like deemed like necessary for some reason. You're protecting your family, or you're a soldier just obeying the king or something. There can be loopholes for that sort of thing. Stealing is, yeah, I mean that's pretty basic ethics. Although, like in Islam, I mean, even the Muslims themselves allow, they admit that their prophet was essentially a bandit when he was living in Medina, because he had to support his followers and himself. So they would be doing pirate raids on caravans, that sort of thing. So you can find exceptions pretty much to any moral precept. But yeah, the basic ones: don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, and usually there's some sexual ethics in basic religions. Don't commit adultery. Don't rape, that kind of thing. Although, getting back to the prophet, he was a little rapey sometimes. So yeah, but those are the basics, I think. And then a lot of the rest are, some of them are largely arbitrary, or like cultural things, like all of the rules that about monks, the robe material and the colors that the robes have to be dyed, and how it's cut and sewn, and that sort of thing is largely arbitrary ancient Indian culture. And a lot of the rest is the same way. Like modern Jews, they converted a precept in the Old Testament: "Thou shalt not boil a kid in its mother's milk," and a later tradition turned that into a Jew is not allowed to eat meat and dairy products at the same meal, which is, I really don't see the point in that. I mean, the "thou shalt not boil a kid in its mother's milk" is one of the few attempts the Old Testament made to be humane to animals. Sort of like "thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the grain." And then it just got distorted into just a meaningless rule that people have to follow just because they think God said so, or whatever. So I think I answered that one. So I'll move on to the next one. And this is from In Manas. And In Manas, he's an intellectual kind of guy. He writes complicated questions. So I better just dive into this here. What can be said of quality with regard to impermanence? Yes, seemingly all states and conditionality can be observed as in flux and motion of rise to fall, but qualifiers never seem to end with respect to their flavor. Bear with me, as this is a hard question for me to phrase, and the various qualities are prompted and conditioned for each being differently as the focusing lens of that being, where it finds expression, is so varied from being to being. But those qualities just seem to be. You won't experience them in a constant way, but when they arise, you will know it's their genus or flavor, and they come in different magnitudes, which is also conditioned. this isn't a question of the being, time, experiencing, but more of that which is experienced. These qualities seem to have been with us from the start to time, almost as if they are perturbations of mind, and they must follow various laws. Just as if a pebble hits the water surface, ripples occur. Just as there are many frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, so too there seem to be mental qualities. Abhidhamma speaks some of what I am asking, chitta and chittasika, which is mind and mental state. Notice how they have categorized all of these qualitative mental factors, and the factors are kind of set in stone. This various The various permutations and manifestations occur in myriad ways, and the ensuing states rise and fall, but these qualities or mental factors are not subject, it would seem, otherwise wouldn't the quality itself end and fall beyond the scope of all experience? They do not, apparently. Okay, well, it seems like Manis is somewhat of a Platonist here, in that those of you who kind of got lost um, while I was reading this, it's essentially he's asking, like, Buddhism teaches that everything is impermanent, but like laws of nature tend to be permanent. That there is sort of a permanence underlying things with regard to at least the rules that everything follows. And I'm really not a Platonist. I don't think that there's, let's see, what would be a good example? He talked about throwing a stone into a pond that makes ripples no matter where you do it. So the impact on the water surface causing ripples could be something that is permanent, but I don't think that the causing ripples is like in some sort of platonic heaven, that it's always that the law is always some substance or essence that's always in existence, and so it exists only when it's being perceived. So I'm kind of a radical, like a nominalist. I think that's what it would be called. I really don't believe in universals. Like Plato believed that, everything that appears in the earth is an imperfect manifestation of something that's like eternal up in heaven. So like a dog, the dog is permeated by dogness. And so dogs come and go, dogs are impermanent, but that perfect dogness is in heaven constantly. And I just don't think so. I'm not much of a Platonist. Neoplatonist maybe, but Plato, I really not had a whole lot of use for him. So it seems to me that we're relying on human psychology to make the declaration that these laws don't change. It could be that some other species that has a very different way of perceiving things might be experiencing very different um, so-called eternal laws, or laws of nature or something. So it's a matter of human perception. And so when we are seeing a rock fall, or let's say an acorn falls from a tree, or the apple falls from the tree. So that's impermanent, but the law of gravity is just always there. But it seems to me that um, it's all conventional truth, and the conventional truth is a matter of perception. And so the law of gravity doesn't really exist unless there's some conscious mind perceiving it. And for each conscious mind perceiving it, it's not necessarily the same thing. It's just a different perception. Um, so you can say that there's a semblance of permanence in these things, but still they only exist if they're being perceived. Like George Berkeley used to say, esse est percipi, which is to exist is to be perceived. So if something isn't being perceived, it's just not there. If the tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around, not only does it not make a sound, but there is no tree. Unless the trees themselves are conscious, there's some kind of other organism experiencing the tree. So yeah, I can see where he's coming from, and there is a certain amount of truth to it, but still I would say that it's all a matter of perceptions, individual perceptions, and yeah, even that is not something that is eternal and unchanging. So I'll just move on to the next question. I hope I answered that without just totally mystifying everybody. The next question is from Mussolini, not the famous one, but a different Mussolini. Do you know anything about the origins of the veneration of the bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which eventually became so widespread in much of Asia? I've heard it said that Avalokiteshvara shares traits in common with the Hindu god Shiva. And Avalokiteshvara, I'm pretty sure, got mutated into Kuan Yin in China. Um, so Kuan Yin, who is a female deity or bodhisattva, um, is trans, essentially. Um, she started off male in India, and I think it was Avalokiteshvara. And yeah, I haven't really studied the history of some of these concepts in Mahayana Buddhism, um, including the origins of Avalokiteshvara. Um, some of the mythological bodhisattvas in Mahayana Buddhism started off as a few, I think, were yakas, or like almost like demonic entities, or like minor deities in various parts of India. Um, I think even the Greek Heracles, or known in English as Hercules, um, I think he got conflated with the Bodhisattva Vajrapani, uh, or is it Padmapani? Like it's one of the Panis. So with regard to Avalokiteshvara, it could be that he was at least in part based on the Hindu god Shiva, but most of them were based on um, just traditional minor deities that got glorified. They got just recruited into the Mahayanist Bodhisattva pantheon. So, because I really don't know the answer to the question, I'll just move on to the next one, which is from Airain, and this is kind of similar. Airain says, is Mahayana kind of similar to the Unitarian Church in Christendom? This is the impression I get. Lots of New Age style relativism elements. Do you find a general difference in the types of people who are drawn to Mahayana versus Theravada? Um, well, I mean, ethnically, um, I think whether you're a Mahayana Buddhist or a Theravada Buddhist, I mean, traditionally, before it moved to the West, um, I mean, it's just a matter of what country you were born in, what culture you were born into, what religion your parents followed. So it would be pretty similar. You know, you'd have the same kind of personality types in both religions, just because, um, I mean, you really didn't have the choice of Mahayana versus Theravada. Um, Mahayana does seem to be more, at least certain schools of it, more faith oriented, maybe a little less intellectual. Some schools of, although some schools of Mahayana are just like very rigorously intellectual. Um, so I would just in yeah, the Unitarian Church. I mean, I'm not sure how the Unitarian Church started. It could have been a kind of progressive movement, and Mahayana Buddhism, I'm pretty sure, could be called a progressive movement in Buddhism and also like in Indian culture. So it was progressive. It was like trying to change Buddhism in certain ways. Although um, some aspects of Mahayana were like a reform movement trying to get back to the early teachings of Buddhism, like Prajna or Pragya Paramita, and even Nagarjuna and his Majjhimaka school. Um, in certain respects, they were like reform movements trying to get back to early, like primordial Dhamma, and away from all the like the technical philosophy that was being cooked up, and a lot of the mythology also. Some of Mahayana was a reaction against Abhidhamma, which is very understandable. Um, so I would say that Mahayana is like it's more progressive than Theravada. Theravada is very conservative. That the Theravadins, after a certain burst of virus-like mutation in the early century, first century or two or three, it became very locked down and conservative, and people not wanting to change anything. Although it changes anyway, just because if it moves into a different culture, it's necessarily going to have to absorb elements of that culture. With regard to Mahayana versus Theravada in the West, like in America, um, the types of people who are drawn to it, I would say that some types of Mahayana, like Zen or like Dzogchen in Tibetan Buddhism, they're similar to Theravada in that they're largely based on meditation and pretty much no nonsense. So yeah, I haven't really noticed a large difference in personality types between Western Zen Buddhists and Western Theravada Buddhists. I think it could just be a matter of which the person got exposed to first. I was originally I originally liked Zen Buddhism and was considering very seriously becoming a Zen monk. Um, but then you got the other schools like Pure Land or Soka Gakkai, Nichiren, that kind of thing, which are just very faith oriented, and the likes of which is very rare in Western Theravada, and so that would attract a different sort of person, I think. So you'd have probably statistically significant statistically significant difference in personality types attracted to like Theravada Buddhism or something like Soka Gakkai. But getting back to the Unitarian Church nowadays, it's just completely progressive. You know, it's like little kids encouraged to stand up front and declare themselves the opposite gender and so forth. Just very strongly leftist, based on what I've seen of it. You know, the flying the gay pride flags out in front of the church and so forth. Um, Mahayana in general, yeah, Mahayana, some aspects of it could be considered that sort of general trend, but not necessarily. There are some like genuine reform aspects of early Mahayana anyway. And Zen is pretty no nonsense and based on practice and meditation and so forth. So I hope I answered that one. And so next I move on to some questions from Matthew. And Matthew says, first of all, kindly describe the difference between samatha and vipassana conceptually and as a practice. And it just kind of butts up against a certain preference that I have I really don't even like the term vipassana, the way it's usually used as a kind of method. It's like you don't practice vipassana, you don't do vipassana. Vipassana literally means insight, and it arises spontaneously, um, like often after you've done samatha. Like one of my favorite suttas um, in the Majjhima Nikaya is the Lesser Discourse on Voidness, where the monk practices samatha. He goes into very advanced contemplative states, you know, just very deep mystical states. And then finally he gets to the state of neither perception nor non-perception, or the signless perception of mind, it's called. The signless perception of mind, which is beyond even fourth jhana, apparently. And that's the highest contemplative state you can attain, is the signless contemplation of mind. And then he realizes after he's come out of it that even that is not enlightenment, even that is not nirvana. And then it's just something clicks. It's like he realizes that, you know, nothing that you can, you know, cultivate is it. You cannot cultivate nirvana. At least you can't get to nirvana. There is like the path does not end at nirvana. You know, you don't follow the path until you get to the gates of nirvana. It doesn't work that way. And so samatha and vipassana are not really opposed in that sense. Vipassana, what is called vipassana, would be much more accurately called satipatthana or just mindfulness meditation. You can say samatha is based on concentration or samadhi, and vipassana is based on mindfulness or sati. And conceptually, you would say that samatha is what you're doing is you are just stilling and clarifying your mind. If you get to fourth jhana, you're just wide awake and your mind is just crystal clear and silent. And then after you get out of that state, then, which is also called purification of mindfulness in the text, after you get out of that state, then vipassana can arise due to the profundity of the experience you just had. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is you're not so much focusing on a single object to the exclusion of everything else, or even getting to the point of just having an empty mind, just wide awake and not thinking anything. That would be more samadhi. But mindfulness is you're focusing on a moving target. You're focusing on whatever arises. So it might be that both the samatha and the mindfulness meditator start off meditating on the breath, like the touch sensation of air at the nostrils. But the main difference would be the samatha meditator, if their mind starts to wander, they just bring it right back to, I mean, if anything else comes up, they just, single-mindedly bring it back to the sensation of touch at the nostrils. Whereas the mindfulness meditator, someone who's practicing satipatthana, they wouldn't necessarily bring it back. I mean, if it's like you got pain in your knee, which happened a lot when I was at a Mahasati center, just, or more than once. I mean, you meditate a lot, you can get pain in your knee, especially if you're meditating more than usual for a prolonged period. Just the pain is always there. So you can just start contemplating and noting the pain, just observe the pain or whatever it is. It's like itches, or there's some weird sound going on outside. You're not thinking, gee, what's making that weird sound outside? But instead, it's like you're hearing it. And so you're just seeing it as you're just observing the sounds, the sensation of sound, or, it's doing the auditory equivalent of observing. So I think it's a false dichotomy where a lot of people, like even in Burma, people ask, which sasana do you belong to, the Samatha sasana or the Vipassana sasana, as though there are two Buddhisms. But really, they're not in conflict. You're supposed to be practicing mindfulness when you're not practicing samatha. So one thing about mindfulness is you can do it no matter what you're doing, anytime, like you're walking or brushing your teeth or doing anything. You can be mindful. You just like Ram Dass used to say, be here now. You're just focusing intently on whatever is coming up, and not really trying to interpret it. You're not thinking about it. You're just observing it as it arises and letting it go as it passes away, and just observing whatever comes up next. And the purification of that would be like you'd see in the Bahya Sutta of the Udana, where in the seen there is only the seen, in the heard there is only the heard. It's like some sound comes up, you're just observing the sound. You're not trying to interpret it. You're not saying, oh, that's a dog barking. It's just hearing the sound as sound. And that would be some fairly good mindfulness. And the vipassana itself, the insight that arises, not the method necessarily, but the insight that arises is eventually what slams you or enlightens you into the state of enlightenment. But even if you're practicing samatha intensely, it's going to be the insight that arises as a result of that. And I mean, some powerful insights can arise through practicing intense samadhi. Just like when you get to the point where you can just sit there not thinking, you realize that you get the insight that you are not your thoughts, and which might be more powerful for intellectual guys than it is for maybe more feelings-oriented, heart-oriented people. But when you can just sit there not thinking and in a sense, you're still there. You haven't just ceased to exist. That when you stop thinking, it's not just like black nothingness. That is, I mean, that's a powerful thing to realize. So that would be like a minor kind of insight. Um, it doesn't work so well for lay people living busy, distracted lives, however. So the main option, the most practical option for lay people living in the world, is Vipassana, although I really don't like the term for mindfulness meditation, but just, being wholeheartedly, in the present moment with whatever you're doing. Even if you're remembering something, I mean, you can still be aware of the sensations of memory, remembering. It's not, you're not lost in the content, but you're still there in the basic phenomena. And it's even with regard to breathing in and out, doing breathing meditation. Um, it's not being extremely mindful if you're thinking breathing in, breathing out. I mean, it's good. It's good as like an elementary practice just to get your mind focused, which in itself has some samatha or samadhi elements. But if you're just observing the touch of air at the nostrils, just feeling the sensation in the felt, there is only the felt, then you're getting closer to reality, because breathing in and breathing out are concepts. But this touch is not a concept. I mean, you can turn it into one, but it's like a sensation, which is more basic. It's closer to reality because there's not all this symbolic interpretation getting in the way. It has to filter through. So I didn't really explain that in order, but that's essentially it. And I think I'll move on to Matthew's next question, which is, what is your practical advice for putting right speech into practice? More specifically, how might a layperson living in the world improve their application of right speech in the workaday, hectic, three screaming kids moment by moment realities of life? It seems relatively straightforward. I mean, first of all, my practical advice for putting right speech into practice is first and foremost, just don't tell lies. And if you're living in the kind of context where just telling blunt, ugly truths is going to get you in a peck of trouble, then you might want to learn how to talk more like a lawyer or a politician, not so much to make you dishonest, but just to avoid having to just say blunt truths. You can kind of pad it a little bit or avoid the subject. Don't say anything, but just flat out lying is worse than being diplomatic. I mean, you don't have to lie to be diplomatic. There are ways you can. It's like sometimes, like, somebody invites you over for dinner or something, and you don't want to just flat out say, I don't feel like coming over to your house. I got other things I'd rather do, which is the truth. But just telling them that might hurt their feelings. But I mean, there's other ways you can come up with something that won't require you to lie. Something else has come up. Just leave it at that. Or I mean, one thing to bear in mind is you can say anything with metta in your heart. You say anything with a certain amount of brotherly love, then people can take it more easily. Then maybe even then it's like, I just don't feel like going anywhere tonight. I'd just rather just stay home. If you say that with, like a friendly, amiable tone of voice, then it's much more palatable to the other person. It's like, I don't want to go to your house, you know. So that sort of thing, it just takes some practice, and some cultivation of some so-called loving kindness, which is a strange translation of metta. Metta literally means something like friendliness. So let's see. Yeah, that would be my practical advice for putting right speech into practice. Plus, there are the other three kinds of wrong speech. There are four, in Theravada Buddhism, there are four kinds of wrong speech. One is just lying. So don't tell lies. Second is, let's see, what is it? Parusavacha or Pisunavacha, I can't remember the order now. Let's just say it's Parusavacha, which is harsh speech. And that's, you're not telling someone off to their face. You're not calling someone names. You're not saying you're stupid, you dumbass, that kind of talk. Um, it just, you just have to like be mindful enough that you don't go into knee-jerk, habitual responses. And then if you're in control of your own mouth, then you just don't say that kind of stuff. And it may be that force of habit will be leading you in that direction, but then you have to be mindful enough that you can just turn off the automatic pilot to some degree and just say what is appropriate rather than just blurt out what years of conditioning have caused you to just blurt out habitually. So that's Parusavacha. And then next is Pisunavacha, which is saying bad things about someone behind their back in order to turn someone against them, or that sort of thing. It's essentially bad mouthing people behind their back. And again, it's like you just have to be, you have to consider that to be important and make it somewhat of a priority, and then just train yourself not to do it. And to some degree, I mean, warning someone, let's say someone is dishonest and they're trying to sell a used car to another one of your friends, you might want to warn him. It's like, yeah, you might not want to trust him too much, but you're not doing it because you dislike the first person. It's because you're trying to help the other person. So your motives are important with regard to this sort of thing. And then finally, there's Sampapalapa, which is usually translated as idle chatter, which is like gossip, that kind of thing. And if you're living in the world, I mean, it's very difficult to avoid. You're at work and some kind of work gossip comes up or something like that. You just got to be careful. So just being mindful and just, um, you know, being aware of what you're going to say before you say it, that kind of thing is your best bet at just practicing right speech. It's like before you say something, you should go through the little filter. Is this appropriate? Is this, unethical or unskillful or unwholesome? That sort of thing. And just don't be an automaton that's just going through life through force of habit, just through conditioning. So let's see. I guess I answered that one. Next question, also from Matthew. What does Buddhism have to say about living with fellow monks who you rather despise? And what lessons might we draw from that as lay people? Well, I think there's different ways of going about it, and you have to go on it like a case by case. Yeah, you just have to do it case by case. Like, for example, in Buddhism, like if there are people that are just like bad people, they're just troublemakers, they're fools. Um, your best bet would just be to avoid them if possible. Like in the Mangala Sutta, which is one of the most well-known Theravada Buddhist texts. It's chanted as a protection chant in Asia. Um, it's a list of 38 blessings in life, and blessing number one is not associating with fools, because mental states are contagious. So if someone really is just a fool, a crook, just a real troublemaker, your best bet, if possible, is just do not associate with these people. Or like if you have to associate with them, they're like a colleague at work or something, then you just keep it, kind of formal. You can still be friendly to them or polite anyway, but you just don't engage any more than you have to. Let's see what else. Other ways, like if you've got someone that really bugs you and it's your own fault, you've got some issue, they remind you of someone that was like a bully in school or something. If you know yourself well enough to know that you don't like this person that's because of your own issues, then in a case like that, or even in the case of the troublemaker, there is the option of just practicing metta, cultivating metta, sending metta to the other person. And if there's such a bastard that it's just you can't bring yourself to do it, there is what is called the pebble method, and I've mentioned this before, I think. where you just take this cute round little pebble and you get like a little glass, a little tumbler, and every day you put the pebble in the tumbler and you pour cold water into it, and you just think, as just as this little pebble is surrounded by this cool water, may so and so, whoever the person is, may they be surrounded by peace and serenity, and usually, I mean, difficult people tend to be difficult because they're unhappy people, and it's just the unhappiness is overflowing and sort of making trouble with others. Like a genuinely happy, contented person isn't going around, making trouble for other people. If you're a happy person, it's live and let live as a general rule. It's usually only if you're miserable that you want to lash out and make other people miserable too. So a certain amount of compassion for people that are real just buttholes. Um, and you can also, there's, I can't remember the sutta, unfortunately. I think it's in the sutta. No, what is it? It's not in the sutta. It's in the Visuddhimagga, where there's like instructions on how to deal with difficult people. And one is just see them as, conditioned mind and matter, that kind of thing. You can just deconstruct them into elements in your mind or some such. But yeah, the two main ways of dealing with them is detach from the difficult people as much as you're able, and try to have some compassion and love, loving kindness towards them, especially if you can't detach from them. They're just part of your life, a difficult family member or something. And it really does have power. You can, if you send metta to someone sincerely. I've come across a number of cases. Like there was one woman who was having real difficulty with like one of her managers at work, and she tried, I think it was the pebble method even, where she's sending metta to that person, and just within like 2 weeks that the difficult manager actually came to that person and sincerely apologized. I realize I've been acting like an ass, and I'm sorry, that kind of a thing. And mental states are contagious. You send love to somebody and it's going to have an effect. Maybe if they're just a hardened butthole, then it won't be a noticeable effect. But in that case, send them love, and just be polite and detached, and be about the best you can do if you can't just go away. All right, so the next question, also from Matthew, and this is his last question here. What is the appropriate right view on the current issue in Ukraine for a monk? Should they be supporting one side or the other with deep convictions about the outcome, or should they simply view it all as impermanence and be above or beyond the current manifestations of dukkha or some other mode of engagement? Yeah, well, a monk is supposed to renounce society, and there's a list of animal talk, tirachana vacha, that monks are supposed to avoid. And it involves like kings and ministers and wars and this kind of thing, politics in general. A monk, I mean, you renounce the world, and so, I mean, you should just be off in the forest meditating for monks. So the Ukraine conflict is just one of, countless conflicts that have occurred in the human world, and it's just more artificially generated dukkha, unhappiness. Still, I mean, if you have, especially as a layperson or just a monk who's just sort of viewing the craziness of samsara, I mean, you could see that both sides have their reasons. Just like the current issue, Ukraine versus Russia, and um, especially in the West, Russia is being demonized and dehumanized, and Putin is like Adolf Hitler, and but I mean, he's got his reasons. I mean, America has bombed who knows how many countries, and we're the good guys though, so it's okay if we do it. Um, and I think part of Putin's reasons are just he doesn't want a NATO country with military bases with missiles aimed at Russia just right on his border. And there's been a lot of talk about Ukraine becoming more westernized, becoming part of the EU, becoming part of NATO, and so forth. but I'm not pretending to understand um, Putin's reasons, but I think that's probably an aspect of it. So yeah, I mean it's wrong to just launch an aggressive attack on a neighboring country, not even really defensive except for maybe in an ideological or uh, preemptive kind of way. So I'm not trying to endorse Putin's or Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but both sides have got their reasons and everything, and that's one reason why it's best not to be uh, picking sides too much. I mean, it's just human nature that you're gonna have preferences and so forth, but the people whose preferences are different are not necessarily demonic entities or Nazis or commies or whatever. So, so sometimes I'm answering questions, and when I get to the end of the answer, it's like, wow, did I really answer that question? I don't know. All right, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, and I apologize sincerely to Matthew if I really didn't answer the question very well. Well, with regard to monks, yeah, it's very clear cut. I mean, the monks shouldn't give a damn, but for lay people watching the news and everything, this is just being a human being. It's just the way humans have been. I've read a lot of history, and it's just been, one war and barbarian invasion after another, and it's been really awful. We're really lucky that we've been living in a relatively peaceful age, at least going back to post World War II. The world has been relatively abnormally peaceful, and this is kind of a minor outburst, it seems like, or at least it's minor thus far. We haven't had any nukes go off anyway. So anyway, getting back to the next question, which is from BPAT427. And BPAT427 says, do you think that something like Hinduism could be more practical than Buddhism for a faith-oriented layperson looking to cultivate positive mental states due to more focus on things like mantras, ritual, and sacrifice, as opposed to dedicating many hours to meditation? Well, that's possible. I mean, Hinduism and Buddhism have a lot of similarities. They both believe in karma, for example. They both believe in enlightenment. They're very similar. And the Buddha, if a non-Buddhist wanted to be ordained, he had to go through a waiting period. But Hindus, or the equivalent, like the analog of Hindus, like the Vedic Brahmanists of his day, they didn't have to go through the waiting period because they believed in karma and stuff already. Um, so there is that. But yeah, Hinduism can be more faith oriented. Yeah, there can be the worship of deities or the devotion to the guru, which are definitely more based on faith. Um, there's more, chanting. Well, not necessarily more chanting, but there's more like singing and group activities like that. What is it, kirtan, that kind of thing that really appeals to some New Age types in the West. And the New Age types are very faith oriented. They're really not like philosophical intellectuals as a general rule. Um, but yeah, I mean, you should try, you should study various religions and to become what in Buddhism is called Bahusuta, having heard much, and then you can make a uh, more intelligent decision with regard to what system works best for you, either within Buddhism or outside of Buddhism. I mean, for some people, Christianity, um, there have been some genuine saints, meditation masters in Christianity, and I guess just the faith in the narrative appealed to them, or it just worked for them, and so I'm not the sort of person who says, if you're not a Buddhist or a Theravada Buddhist, you have a wrong view and you're going to burn in hell. Certainly not. Um, I've studied various religions enough to know that there have been great saints, very good, saintly, wise people in just about every tradition. And so, I mean, once you get to the ultimate reality that underlies all the stories become irrelevant. You can still, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, you can still endorse the cultural traditions, but that's largely irrelevant to the underlying ultimate reality that an enlightened being presumably has experienced. So let's see here. Yeah, so I'd say the answer to that question, I would say is yep. I'll move on to the next one. Do you plan on getting a flashlight for your Glock 19? And do you plan on getting a carry permit? Well, that's kind of a change of pace. Glock questions. Yeah, I haven't even gotten the Glock yet. It's just so many. February was there was all kinds of like property taxes and all kinds of weird expenses. I got like two fake front teeth and everything, and so yeah, I haven't got it yet. I am planning. I sincerely hope I will get the pistol within a month. And in getting to the question here, do I plan on getting a flashlight for the Glock 19? No, I am not planning on getting like a mountable flashlight for it. It has 16. I think a Glock 19 has a magazine that holds 16 rounds, so if necessary, I can just spray bullets if I can't see in the dark. Um, and the next part of the question here is, do you plan on getting a carry permit? Yeah, I will get a concealed carry permit, which is one reason why I want to get a Glock 19, because it's a very compact little pistol, but still relatively accurate. And I have a few friends who are gun bunnies, and they tell me that the Glock 19 is like approximately the perfect pistol because it's so easy to, it rarely misfires, it's easy to maintain, easy to take apart and clean. It holds a lot of rounds, more than a revolver, and it's small and compact and still accurate. So um, yeah, I think that answers the question. I did a straightforward, non-roundabout answer to these questions. So no, I'm not planning on getting a flashlight for the Glock, and yes, I do plan on getting a concealed carry permit. So the next question, also from BPAT427. Yeah, BPAT427. Do you still have a daily sitting practice? If so, have you seen your focus hindered at all since rejoining lay life? Um, when I was a monk, like my first 10 years as a monk, I had it worked out that I was averaging 6 hours a day of meditating, at least 6 hours a day. I was meditating a lot. And like after I'd been a monk for more than 20 years, I just stopped making progress. And it was just becoming really frustrating. Just sitting there and just, I mean, it was like a struggle, just trying to keep going. And so after I after I disrobed, or even like a few months before I disrobed, yeah, I just stopped regular sitting practice. And I do not sit in meditation every day. In fact, I have not sat in meditation for quite a long time. Um, if so, have you seen your focus hindered at all since rejoining lay life? Um, yeah, my focus has been, and there's just so many more distractions. And what's more important, I think, um, is that when you're living a lay life, you have to dedicate so much of your energy into just the practical necessities of living a lay life, like working, that if you can't somehow make that a spiritual practice, then it's using up a lot of your energy and distracting you, so that it's just sort of, you have less energy to direct towards spiritual things. And so I think that has been, I mean, just sitting in meditation, it's not necessarily significant. It can be very useful. I mean, I did it a lot, but if you can maintain mindfulness, you can stay centered, um, whether you're sitting or not, then you're doing fairly well. If you can keep the clarity of mind and just be, in the present moment. And sitting meditation, if you're good at, I was never really good at meditation. I had to work so hard just to get into what states I had attained. But by nature, by disposition, I have never been a really good meditator. I think my brain is just hyperactive, like a lot of Westerners who are just compulsive thinkers or something. So I had a lot of adicca, or mental restlessness. So Yeah, I still try to be mindful and just keep spirit in heart. But sitting cross-legged with my eyes closed on a cushion or on the floor, um, yeah, I've pretty much stopped doing it. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is, let's see, also from BPAT 427. Do you have any suggestions for a layperson getting to get their significant other into Dharma? Well, you could try harping at them incessantly, preaching at them, but it's not going to work. I think your best bet in helping anybody to get interested in Dhamma is just be a living example. If they can see that you are into Dharma or Dhamma, and that you are a happy, serene person, you're just it's like the benefit of it is just obvious. It's just, right there for them to see. Then, yeah, they might make the connection between your serenity and, morality and so forth, and the fact that you're practicing Dharma. I think that would be the best, the ways that I have helped people the most. I think, as far as I know, at least some of the times I've helped people a lot has been unintentionally. Like I've had a few monks. I was living in a big school monastery, I mentioned already tonight, with lots of monks there. And there was a dining hall, and food was served there every day, but I never went there. I never went there once. I would always just take my bowl and walk through the village and get my food that way through what's called pindapata, through alms round. And I didn't, I wasn't doing it ostentatiously. It was just my own preference. But then I remember one time a monk came up to me and sincerely thanked me. I didn't even know who he was. He was just kind of, just a casual acquaintance. You see him around, but he came up to me and just sincerely thanked me because he said he was inspired by seeing me going for alms round every day, and so he started doing it. And he felt really good about it. It made him really happy. So, that's the best way, or one of the most effective ways of teaching someone is, you're just living your Dharma, you're a living example, and then they can see that through you, that it has benefits. If you're practicing correctly. If you're not practicing correctly and you're still, a miserable person and, prone to fits of road rage and so forth, then, yeah, you're not going to be very persuasive. I remember there used to be a public service announcement a long time ago, back when I was a long-haired eco hippie type, and it was this guy who looked like the stereotypical football, like high school football coach. And it's like, he has the egg and says, "This is your brain," and he cracks it in the frying pan, and it's like sizzling and popping, and it says, "This is your brain on drugs." And he has this just indignant, angry look on his face, and he's like, "Any questions?" And I would always think, yeah, if I stop getting high, will I be as happy as you? Because he obviously wasn't a happy person. He might have just been acting, for the public service announcement, but still, it's not a good way of persuading people that your way is the best way if you're obviously just like a miserable, cranky kind of person. So yeah, just be a good example. That wowould be your best way. And I don't know, maybe if you go to a temple or something, you might invite them to come along or something. But still, this would be a good example. And so I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Chaplin. And Chaplin says, "Do you plan on doing more forest Dharma talks or readings? Really enjoy them." Um, yeah, it's not really on some kind of schedule that I have written up, but yeah, I'm sure it's going to happen again. Yeah, I did a few videos where I'm reading favorite texts in a forest setting, and yeah, I can do that again. Originally my plan was, when I came to South Carolina, was maybe doing like forest retreats. I still think it's an excellent idea, especially in the West, where you just go on a short hiking trip, into the woods somewhere to some, really nice forest area, maybe like by a river or something, and just have the meditation retreat there, where everyone just has their own little place where they spend the day meditating, and then you sit around the campfire in the evening and have the Dharma talk. And a lot of it might be talks on just overcoming fear, just living alone in a forest, just sitting under a tree. It can be kind of scary at night. Like, you're sitting there meditating in the middle of the night, and you hear a twig snap nearby. It's like, what was that? And how do you deal with that? Just get up and run. I mean, it's dark, you can't see anyway, and if it's a dangerous animal, it probably runs faster than you anyhow. So you just sit there and you just observe the fear, or observe, whatever it is. You feel your heart beating faster, and these worried thoughts continue to arise. You just watch them and let them go. Being scared isn't going to help. And just learning about like asceticism, austerity, just that kind of thing. I think it could be really helpful in the West, in America, and it'd be a cheap way of doing a good meditation retreat. You wouldn't have to rent a venue, and you wouldn't have to charge a lot of money and that kind of thing. I mean, you could even be some of it could be fasting too, so you wouldn't even have to worry about food. I did that a few times when I was living in Washington State as a monk, but I have to admit it never really caught on. There's most of the Vipassana people, the insight meditation people, are boomers with health issues, and they're just too westernized to really want to hack the discomfort and hunger of a forest fast. But I still think it would be a good idea if it could only catch on, get some traction. And so I'll just move on to Chaplain's next question. How are you liking the new beard, and will you keep it? She's referring to this hair on my face, and this is literally the first beard I've ever grown. This is the longest beard I've ever had in my life, and one reason why I grew it is at work. I work at a sheet metal shop in South Carolina at present, and there's like 15 guys there, and I was one of the 2 guys that didn't have a beard. I don't know what it is. It's like down south, it's guys in the working class. I'm not getting the tats all up and down my arms, but I did grow the beard, and the boss really likes it. He has complimented me on it a couple times, but I will probably shave it off when it starts getting really hot. When it starts getting real sweaty and drippy and stuff, I'll probably shave it off. But I might grow it again next winter. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not really I don't really make like plans like that. I just kind of go day by day with regard to certain things like beard growing. So finally, last question from Chaplain and last question on the list. And that is, really liking your new spiritual right project videos. Do you guys have any plans for future content there? Well, we're going to continue making videos. There is um, a group that I have been invited to join, and I'm in it, called Spiritual Right. And it has a website which is still under construction. That's one of our main obstacles at present. And YouTube videos, we've got a YouTube channel, and I think there's a presence on Twitter that I'm not in control of. And there's even a presence on TikTok, which I've never seen before. Um, I would like us to get on to the new Rumble and Truth Social, but I might have to take charge of that in order for it to happen. And I'm really not into a lot of tech stuff. But yeah, if you're interested in spiritual right, I can leave the the YouTube link below, along with all of my other like internet, my URL links, which should be below here in the above the comments, and also the links to my 3 books. Probably be 4 before very much longer. So yeah, the Spiritual Right project. When we get the website fully going, there's going to be articles there also, and we're just going to continue making videos, like really short ones that they can put on TikTok, and then longer ones, and the short ones and the long ones will be on on YouTube. And so far it's been good. So I guess that's it. I'm done. And be happy.